I didn't plan to start a company. I planned to survive one more annual meeting without making eye contact with the man who could end my career with a sentence. If you've ever sat under stage lights while your own spreadsheets are turned into confetti for investors, you know the feeling. The water bottle cap that won't twist quietly, the mic taped to your collar like a leash, the smell of rental carpet warmed by too many shoes. You practice gratitude faces. You nod at charts you built at 2 a.m. You tell yourself there's a payday coming, or at least a clean line on your resume if you don't rock the boat. 3 days before the meeting, my boss, David, had texted me at 11:47 p.m. Need slides, redone, story still muddy. I redid the slides. I rebuilt the model. I wrote talking points that landed his jokes. When the sun came up, I kissed my wife on the forehead, missed another breakfast with my daughter, and told myself this would be the last crazy push before things stabilized. 5 years I'd been telling myself that. 5 years of end-of-quarter sprints and quick favors that ate weekends. 5 years of being the guy who fixed it quietly. The hotel ballroom was cold enough to make the glass sweat. Rows of small chairs, center aisle for the cameras, a stage with a backdrop that said 202X Building Forward, in a font that probably cost as much as our junior analysts' bonuses. The board sat front left, investors center, employees scattered in the back like families at a graduation for someone else's kid. I watched David work the room, sleeves rolled, smile calibrated, the kind of charisma that photographs better than it lives. When I first joined, that smile made me want to do the impossible for him. Now it made me check my pockets. My segment was toward the end. Operations and retention. Not the sexy part of the show, but the part that kept us alive when supply chains pinched and a client threatened to walk. The MC handed me the clicker. My name flashed on the monitors. Neat, correct, forgettable. I took a breath, felt the mic tape pull at my collarbone, and started. 10 slides in, I'd landed the key points. We'd reduced churn by 18% with 2 low-cost changes. We cut onboarding time by 6 days. We kept our largest account during a pricing tantrum by giving them transparency no one else would. People were nodding. David was nodding too, until he wasn't. It happened on slide 12. A hedge fund guy in a dark suit asked about margins post Q3. I answered clearly. He pressed. I clarified. Then I said the thing I wasn't supposed to say out loud. We chose not to cut support headcount because our customers were already at a breaking point. It was true. It was also off script. On the monitor by the stage, I saw David smile, hold for a count of 2, then fade a millimeter. He stepped toward the lectern like a man approaching a skittish animal. "Let me jump in," he said, laying a light hand on my elbow that felt like a hand on a fire alarm. "What you're hearing is passion. That's why we hired him." He looked at the investor. He looked at the board. Then he looked over my head, past me, like I was a column in the ballroom. Do I wish sometimes that we'd hired someone with a different mindset? Someone less conservative? Sure, hindsight's 20/20. A laugh rolled across the room from people who laugh when they're told. The sentence hit me first in the throat, then in the ears. I stepped back half an inch. He kept talking about the healthy friction between vision and operations, about learning moments, about building forward. The clicker hung in my hand like a forgotten utensil. The slide behind us froze on a chart I'd built at my kitchen table, while my daughter practiced spelling words with a whisper because Dad has a big day tomorrow. When the Q&A ended, he clapped me on the shoulder. Cameras took the shot. Someone from PR handed me a bottle of water and said, "You handled that well." I thought about the word handled, how it's used on machinery and animals. I sat in the wings while they moved on to product and vision. Applause bent around me like wind around a stalled car. Afterward, the mingling. People who don't know you well think it helps to squeeze your forearm and say, "All part of the game, right?" David did his rounds and eventually circled back. "Don't take it personally," he said, eyes grazing my tie. "Investors like honesty. You're honest. It's why I keep you. Keep, like a tool you store in a red drawer until you need it to pry something loose. I said, understood. My voice sounded like someone else's, calm, even grateful. I found a quiet service corridor behind the kitchen where the floor smelled like bleach and coffee. I leaned my forehead against the cool wall and stared at a taped paper that said, Exit Route. 10 years ago, I'd left a smaller company for this one because I believed we were building something clean. Real value, decent hours, no games. The hours got longer, the games more elaborate. I justified every compromise as temporary. Promotions have gravity. Mortgages do too. You start measuring your pride in quarters and vesting cliffs. In the Uber home, my phone buzzed with congratulations. Great stage presence. Loved your section. Ignore David. He's just playing to the room. My wife asked how it went. I said, fine, because I didn't want to put my day inside her day. Our daughter had left a drawing on my desk. 3 stick figures under a rectangle sun. My tie the wrong color. Our smiles too big for our faces. I sat in my office and stared at the drawing until the corners softened. At midnight, I opened my laptop. I wrote a resignation letter I didn't plan to send. It wasn't dramatic. No accusations. Just facts. Dates, contributions, gratitude in the right amounts. I proofread it like it was going to court. Then I saved it in a folder called House. I don't know why I called it that. Maybe because the company had turned into a place I slept in, not lived in. Maybe because I wanted to build something I could actually stand inside without apologizing for the view. Sleep didn't come. At 2:13 a.m., my phone lit the room with the blue-white of instrument panels. A colleague texted, "You okay?" I typed, "Yep." Deleted it. Typed, "He crossed a line." Deleted that too. Typed nothing and set the phone face down. Morning came with hard light and cereal bowls. My daughter asked if the meeting had gone good or bad. I said, it went. And she nodded like a person who understands weather. On the drive to the office, the freeway looked like it always does, lanes of patience and regret. I parked in the same spot, swiped the same badge, poured the same coffee that never tastes like coffee after 9 a.m. The office smelled like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. The plants near reception were fake. I'd never noticed. David called me in at 10. He shut the door, leaned on the edge of his desk like a coach. "We need to talk about yesterday," he said. My heart didn't spike. It didn't need to. I already knew the sensation well enough to ignore it. He talked about narratives and optics and the importance of alignment. He said the word loyalty like a brand value. Yet when he was finished, I asked one question. "If you were me, what would you do?" He blinked, smiled. "I'd take the raise I'm offering, keep my head down, and prove you can evolve." I left his office and stood in the hallway where the framed mission statement hung. Someone had straightened it recently. The glass reflected a thin version of me. I looked like a man who had given away small pieces of himself for so long he could no longer count them. Back at my desk, the resignation letter waited where I'd left it, almost polite. I changed the date. I removed 2 sentences that sounded like a man begging to stay. I printed it. The printer coughed like an old engine and delivered my life to a tray, face down. When I handed David the envelope, his mouth did a little theater of surprise. "You're making a mistake," he said, the kind of phrase that comes preloaded on powerful tongues. I said, "Probably." He offered more money. He offered a title. He offered, in that practiced, gentle way, the chance to pretend none of it had happened. I told him I appreciated it. I told him it was time. I packed a cardboard box. Not the movie kind with a sad plant and a photo frame. Just cables, notebooks. A coffee mug my daughter had drawn on with a paint marker. People hugged me like I was shipping out. A few whispered, "I wish I could," like a confession to a stranger on a train. In the elevator, a young analyst I barely knew said, "I liked your honesty up there." I said, "Thanks." Honesty isn't a strategy, it's a door. Outside, the air had a new temperature. I sat in my car with the engine off and listened to the sound the world makes when you stop telling it what to be. I didn't have a plan. I had a sentence that wouldn't stop repeating. Do I wish sometimes that we'd hired someone else? I thought about it, and for the first time in years, I answered out loud where no one could hear me. Yes, me too. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence would cost him everything. I didn't quit to make a point. I quit because the silence after that meeting was louder than the applause. For 3 days, I kept waiting for regret to show up. It didn't. I cleaned out my company laptop, archived old files, even made a spreadsheet of savings versus burn rate. Like some part of me still needed to turn freedom into math. My wife didn't ask me why I left. She just said, "You've been gone for a long time already." Leaving was easy. Staying gone was hard. For the first week, my mornings felt hollow. No inbox to open, no 9:30 check-ins, no fire drills labeled urgent. I'd wake up, make coffee that actually tasted like coffee, sit at the table, and stare at the quiet. My phone stopped buzzing. LinkedIn turned me into a ghost. And yet, under all that static, something small started to move. A hum I hadn't felt in years. I started sketching ideas, not for a startup, just fixes. The things I used to patch over in David's company, but never had time to build right. A workflow tool, a smarter client dashboard, a way to actually listen to feedback instead of burying it under layers of alignment. One night, my old teammate Alex called. "You really did it," he said. "I did." "You regret it yet?" "Not yet." Pause. Good. Because I think I'm next. He came over the next morning with 2 coffees and a backpack full of hardware. We sat on my porch, the sun cutting through the fence slats, and started writing down what we would do differently. No office politics, no investors chasing vanity metrics. Just build something that actually worked. We didn't call it a company. We called it a project, because company still sounded like a cage. Alex had a small severance, I had savings, and my wife, God bless her, had belief. "Just don't lose yourself again," she said. Our first office was the spare bedroom, then a shared workspace that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. The walls were lined with half-finished dreams, crypto logos, fitness apps, disruption written in neon. We didn't belong there, and that's exactly why it worked. We coded, pitched, broke things, rebuilt. Days blurred, nights stretched. We'd order takeout, celebrate small wins, an investor reply, a working prototype, a line of code that didn't crash. Every mistake was ours alone. Every fix, too. By month 3, we had something real. A tool that simplified project visibility for remote teams. Not sexy, but useful. Clients started signing up, small ones first. Freelancers, startups. Then an agency I'd once pitched at my old company and lost. They remembered me. "You left?" they asked. "Good. You were the only honest one." But for every yes, there were 10 no's. Investors who ghosted. Emails that vanished into silence. Bills that didn't. I sold my watch. Alex sold his car. We stopped ordering food and started boiling pasta again. Still, we kept going. One night, after another rejection, Alex said, "What if we're just proving David right?" It hit hard. I didn't answer right away. The air in that co-working room felt heavier than it should. Finally, I said, "No, we're proving him irrelevant." That became our line, our private war cry. 3 months later, the impossible happened. A mid-sized logistics firm, one of David's clients, asked for a demo. Their ops director had heard about our product through word of mouth. I didn't tell him who I used to work for. We went in calm, prepared, steady. They signed within 2 weeks. That deal changed everything. It gave us proof, revenue, confidence. It also gave me something else, a kind of quiet fire that didn't burn out. David found out. I know because he called me one afternoon. His voice wrapped in that old arrogance, pretending to be friendly. Heard you're freelancing now, he said. Something like that. Good for you. Hope you're not poaching clients. I don't need to. He laughed, thin and sharp. Well, best of luck. It's a tough world out there without a safety net. He hung up before I could respond, but I didn't need to. Because 2 weeks later, that freelance project signed a second major client. Another one from his portfolio. Not stolen, just earned. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic LinkedIn lines about revenge or destiny. I just kept working. My inbox filled again, not with orders, but with opportunities. Alex started hiring contractors. The prototype became a product. The product became a company. And me? I started sleeping better. Until one morning I got a message from an old coworker. Did you hear? The board's cutting staff again. David's under pressure. They lost a big client. I didn't reply. I just sat there, the coffee cooling in my hand, staring out the window at nothing in particular. I didn't wish him pain. I just wished he could feel what it's like to be underestimated. The way he made me feel that day in front of everyone. But that was just the beginning. Because in 3 months I was going to walk into his world again. Not as an employee, not as a rival, but as the man holding the contract that decided his future. And that night, as Alex and I reviewed our next funding offer, I realized something that made my hands shake. Not from fear, but from clarity. That night, I stopped being the employee he remembered and became the competitor he feared. Success doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like exhaustion that finally starts to mean something. By month 9, the company we'd built from Alex's backpack and my insomnia had clients on 3 continents. Small contracts, mostly. Agile teams, distributed firms, but steady ones. Our name started circulating in Slack groups and LinkedIn DMs like a rumor people hoped was true. There's a new platform that actually works. I hired 2 of David's former analysts, not out of spite, out of symmetry. They'd been laid off during his latest strategic downsizing. The first day they walked into our cramped office, a rented corner of an old warehouse. One of them said, "This feels like what I thought working for him would be." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Every morning I still woke at 6:30 out of habit, but now there was no dread, just focus. Coffee, code, calls, creation. My wife started smiling at breakfast again. My daughter would peek into my workspace and whisper, "Building the big thing, Dad?" I'd nod and she'd say, "Don't forget lunch this time." I never did. Then came the email. Subject line, potential partnership opportunity. Sender, R. Matthews. Executive VP, Cormorant Ventures. I almost ignored it. Venture emails are a dime a dozen, but curiosity won. I opened it and froze halfway through the second paragraph. We're impressed with your recent growth. One of our portfolio companies has been struggling to modernize its operations. We believe your solution might be exactly what they need. Would you be open to discussing an acquisition? Attached, a list of their portfolio companies. Third on the list, Helix Dynamics, David's company. My throat went dry. Alex leaned over my shoulder, reading the same line twice. "You think it's real?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Too real." That night, I didn't sleep. My brain kept replaying that moment on stage, David's voice echoing, "Do I wish we'd hired someone else?" Like a skipping record. And now his company was bleeding money, and the board was apparently looking for a buyer. I could have said no. I could have walked away. But I didn't leave to forget. I left to build. And maybe, just maybe, this was how the story was meant to fold in on itself. 2 weeks later, we sat in a glass-walled conference room downtown, sunlight slicing through the blinds. Across from us, 3 men in suits, and a woman with eyes that never stopped calculating. Matthews did most of the talking. He laid out the numbers, the reasons, the narrative. Helix had overextended, overhired, and overpromised. Their infrastructure was outdated. Clients were leaving, investors were restless, and they needed an out. Alex stayed silent, taking notes. I nodded at the right times. Inside, my pulse was calm, a kind of stillness that comes when you realize the storm has finally started turning your way. Would you consider a full acquisition? Matthews asked. Depends on the valuation, I said evenly, and on who's staying. He smiled faintly. The board is prepared to discuss all options, including leadership changes. Leadership changes. I didn't need to ask who they meant. After the meeting, Alex and I stood on the sidewalk, the city's noise rushing around us. He exhaled, slow and shaky. You're thinking about it? I'm thinking about everything. This could ruin him. I nodded. That's not the goal. What is? To end it. The due diligence phase started. Weeks of silence filled with spreadsheets, valuations, back-channel calls. Through it all, I kept remembering the small things. The smirk in that ballroom. The sting of humiliation that had lived under my skin like static. But the more I worked through the process, the less it felt like revenge, and the more it felt like gravity. What's broken finds its way back to the ground. Then, one Thursday evening, Alex burst into the office, phone in hand. They sent the final term sheet, he said, breathless. They agreed to our number. How close? He grinned. Exactly what we asked for. David? Still there, but not for long. I looked at the screen. My company, our company, was about to buy his. A silence filled the room that wasn't shock or celebration, just the weight of completion. I walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. For a year, I'd been running from that sentence. Now I was about to rewrite it. The announcement would be public in 48 hours. The lawyers had called it a strategic merger. The press would call it a surprise acquisition. But I knew what it really was. It was the echo of a single line, spoken under stage lights, finding its way back home. Alex broke the silence. You're going to see him again, aren't you? Yeah. What are you going to say? Nothing, I said. Not yet. He nodded slowly. So what now? I turned back to the glowing skyline, the reflection of our small logo flickering in the window. Now, I said, we prepare the paperwork. Because in less than a week, I'd walk into the same building I once walked out of with a cardboard box. Only this time, the box would be full of contracts, and my name would be on the top line. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The morning of the signing felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something irreversible. I parked outside the same glass tower I used to walk into every day, 10 minutes early, as always. The lobby hadn't changed, the same marble floors, the same artificial plants, the same receptionist who used to greet me with that polite half-smile of pity reserved for mid-levels. Only this time, she stood up. Good morning, Mr. Lane, she said, using my last name with a kind of careful respect. They're expecting you upstairs. The elevator hummed the way I remembered, soft, mechanical, indifferent. My reflection in the metal walls didn't look like victory. It looked calm. Maybe that's what freedom actually looks like when it finally shows up. The doors opened to the top floor. The conference room was already lit. David stood near the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the skyline like a man pretending he wasn't cornered. Ethan, he said, turning, didn't expect to see you in person. I wanted to, I said. He smiled. That same polished, camera-ready smile, now a little cracked at the edges. You've done well for yourself. So have you, I said, up until recently. He chuckled. You always had a sharp tongue. I didn't reply. The lawyers entered, followed by 2 board members. Papers were laid out, signatures queued. David kept talking about markets, about strategy, about how it's not really a loss if it's a transition. His words filled the air like smoke in a closed room. I waited until the final document slid across the table. The lawyer turned it toward me. Mr. Lane, if you'll just sign here, Helix Dynamics will be officially merged under your holding entity. I looked at the line, then at David. His jaw tightened, the faintest flicker of realization that this was real, that the company he'd once lorded over was about to belong to the man he'd humiliated. I signed. One stroke at a time. Ink on paper. End of story. David broke the silence first. So, he said lightly, I guess you really did start your own thing after all. I did. And now you bought mine. I nodded. Seems that way. He gave a dry laugh. Guess that means I work for you now. I met his eyes. No, you don't. Something shifted behind his face, pride trying to find a place to hide. He glanced at the board. So this is it? This is it, one of them said. He exhaled like the air had weight. You must feel pretty good about this. I thought about it. The years of late nights, the humiliation, the anger that had burned down to ash and rebuilt itself into something quieter, sharper. I don't feel good, I said. I feel done. He nodded slowly. You always were sentimental. Maybe he was right. Maybe walking into that room wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about closure, the kind that doesn't come with applause or tears, just a steady heartbeat that finally stops waiting for approval. We shook hands. His was colder than I remembered. Cameras flashed from the hallway, PR shots for the press release that would read, Strategic merger finalized. New era begins. When it was over, I stepped out of the conference room. The same hallway, same carpet, same framed mission statement, but it didn't look the same anymore. It looked small. In the elevator, I caught my reflection again. The man looking back wasn't the employee who'd once rehearsed smiles in this mirror. He wasn't angry anymore, just steady. Down in the lobby, Alex was waiting. How'd it go? It's done, I said. He grinned. You tell him? Tell him what? The line, you know. I smiled, faint and tired. Yeah. When David had asked, half laughing, You really bought us? I'd looked at him and said, I just hired someone else. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The city sounded different. Or maybe I was finally hearing it right. We walked to the car, contracts in hand. Alex said, You think he'll ever get it? Doesn't matter, I said. I did. At a red light, I caught myself glancing in the rearview mirror. Not out of paranoia, just curiosity. The building stood tall behind us, glass catching the sunlight like nothing had happened. A year ago, I'd walked out of it with a box of cables and a coffee mug my daughter had painted. Now I was driving away with something heavier and quieter than revenge. Peace. At home, my wife opened the door before I could knock. She looked at me, at the calm in my face, and didn't ask a single question. Our daughter ran up, tugging my sleeve. Did you finish the big thing, Dad? I knelt down, smiled. Yeah, I said. It's finished. That night, I sat in my office. Same desk, same lamp, new silence. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore. I thought about the first day I quit, the fear, the doubts, the endless questions about what I was doing, and then I thought about David's sentence, the one that had started it all. Do I wish we'd hired someone else? I looked around at what I'd built, a company, a team, a life that finally made sense, and whispered into the dark, me too. He gave me the push I didn't know I needed. I should probably thank him, but I won't.